Mike Demergis for the King, Scott Engel here at Citi Field for Roto Experts at the Ballpark for the Fantasy Sports Network. And Scott, today we went into the Philadelphia Phillies locker room and we talked to an old veteran, a guy who many fantasy owners didn't think would contribute much. They were wrong about Aaron Harang.
Yes, Harang's been terrific. He's a guy that wasn't even drafted, Mike, by in most leagues, and ended up being a terrific free agent pickup. This guy has really helped you. If you were one of those fantasy owners who drafted an injured guy like an Alex Cobb or a Hyunjin Ryu, he's really filled in nicely. And for other owners, he's filled in really nicely as maybe your fifth, sixth starter, and he's really helped in National League only leagues. Some fantasy analysts feel like can't keep it up, but they kept saying that about Harang last year. You look at some of the advanced metrics, Mike, and you look at his fielding independent pitching and his BABIP, and it indicates there might be some regression coming, but Harang, maybe he'll suffer a bad start or two or three down the way, but he looks like he's going to be very dependable for fantasy players going forward.
And the one thing about Aaron Harang is during those off years, so you can't kick yourself, fantasy owners, for not going with them. It was during those off years where he really learned a lot about himself.
Your down years, I feel like that's where you learn the most about yourself and learn what you need to improve on and what you need to really fine tune to, hopefully give you more success. And I was able to do that, the last couple of years, and going into last year, really kind of fine tuning, get my confidence level back up early in the year, and I've just been going from there.
And Harang, through his first 10 starts, Scott, over 60 innings and an ERA under 2. Pretty good.
Yeah, and he started off this season with 4 home starts with his ERA of 0.61. That's the best in a 40-year run of the Phillies. Not since 1975 if anybody started at home that well. And like he said, he learned a lot from those down years of 2013 and 2014 where he played for 4 different teams. But the Phillies took a shot on him, and it's really worked out. And any fantasy owner who spent $1 on him in free agency, you did really well.
Sticking with the pitching, Scott, now moving to the bullpen, Ken Giles is really lighting things up as a setup guy for Jonathan Papelbon.
Yeah, if you play in a league with holds, he's been everything that you wanted. Had a recent finger injury, was able to work through it. His strikeout rate is down from last year, but still figures to be very dominant towards the back end of that bullpen. And this guy is the closer of the future. I think people in keeper and dynasty leagues know this very well.
And Giles spoke to us, and he basically said, you know what? I got the closer mentality.
That's how I function. That's how I work. And it's just watching him do it as the closer. It's just one of those things. I need to watch how he does it in the 9th inning, because the 8th and 9th inning they're a little bit different as in situational parts. But, watching him in the 9th inning and how he goes and attacks those hitters, how he uses his pitch selection, it's just a great thing to watch.
So Giles there, as you mentioned, the closer of the future, and he's getting some great mentoring from Jonathan Papelbon.
Yes, he said learning from Papelbon, he's already had the closer mentality himself, but watching Jonathan actually do it has meant a lot to him. And with Giles, you look at some of the advanced metrics, and it indicates that even though the K walk percentage is down, I think he's becoming more of a pitcher this year than just a thrower. And you kind of like that when you view him for the future as a fantasy closer.
And Papelbon, moving to him, 11 saves in his first 11 opportunities, and he really loves this dynamic with Giles. And fans shouldn't look at this like, oh, where'd this come from? This has kind of been in the works for some time.
Well, yeah, I definitely feel like that, and that's been my goal to try to get there since I've come here, is to have that 1-2 punch. And Kenny's been real consistent, and I think the biggest thing in our bullpen is to stay consistent. It's 162 games, and that's the hardest part about it, is being consistent day in and day out.
So, Scott, Papelbon continues to be a fantasy rock. Both him and Giles, when they're in the game, the Phillies are 29-1.
Yes, when that combination shows up 1-2, it's not only great for the Phillies, they don't win a lot of games, but you have to remember with a closer like Papelbon, when he's on a team like the Phillies, they will win close games. And you want a guy like Giles setting up Papelbon if you have him as your fantasy closer, because you want the guy to lock it down in the 8th inning and bring it to the 9th. Everybody in the American League talks about Betances to Andrew Miller, but Giles to Papelbon has been quite a combination. And when people were talking in the preseason about Papelbon, they really didn't want to view him as a top fantasy closer anymore. Maybe those days were over. But the guy's been nothing but solid. And if you need a good, really solid source of saves, it won't cost you a heck of a lot to get Papelbon in a trade.
And one guy who's really been putting numbers is, of course, Ryan Howard. Over his last 10 games, Scott, with 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, batting over 350. This guy's really been lighting things up.
Yeah, Howard, changed his batting stance in the preseason. But the biggest thing for him that he's been telling reporters when he talks to them is the health, or the Achilles injury and the foot problems over the last few years. It's not about just changing his approach at the plate, but it's also just about being healthy. Now, you look at the numbers and you look at the batting average and then compare it to some of the advanced metrics. You look at his isolated power and his weighted on-base average and maybe even his BABIP, and I think that indicates there's going to be some regression coming, but Howard is a really solid corner infielder. I got him for $1 in Tout Wars. I'm very happy with the production. Anything you get out of Ryan Howard like this, you just have to take what you can get when you can get it. And of course, he's not going to tell us this, but I think he's also hitting well because he's auditioning for a trade. Who knows how much longer he's going to be in Philadelphia.
So the resurgence of Howard has the team very excited, including the assistant hitting coach, John Meiserock, who said he got some help from his old coach, Charlie Manuel.
He's healthy. He's in good shape. He works awful hard. Charlie was there. Charlie saw him back in the late 2000 when Ryan was running the National League, and he got back to the basics of that. And you're seeing the proof right now that he's still one of the most feared hitters in the National League.
And Scott, as we continue back to the future, Chase Utley, who is under the Mendoza line, but over his last 10 games, batting above 400.
Yeah, Chase Utley's been incredibly unlucky. I mean, you look at his BABIP, it was under 100 in the first month, under 200 entering this week. It's got to turn around. But then you look at the weighted on-base average and the percentage of hard-hit balls that he's had so far this season. It doesn't indicate a major turnaround. I would still keep Utley on your roster. I know some people are thinking of actually cutting him. But at best, I think you're going to hope that he can be a serviceable fantasy middle infielder the rest of the way.
And Meiserock thinks Utley has really turned the corner.
I think it's real close. I think Chase bottomed out. I don't know. You guys probably have the numbers at 0.99 a month ago. Since then, he's probably hitting 350 in the last couple of weeks. So it was a culmination of a lot of bad things, bad luck, hitting a lot of balls at people. Chase worked his way through it, and the Chase Utley of old is right around the corner.
And Scott, before we wrap things up here at Citi Field, you have some parting comments or thoughts about Freddie Galvis and Mikiel Frankel.
Galvis is going to continue to be a serviceable fantasy middle infielder, Mike. The BABIP is kind of high. It does point to some regression, but he's going to give you a decent amount of speed and runs scored, for basically somebody that you picked up as a flyer. But Franco is really the guy to watch. He wasn't ready last year. He is ready this year. They recently called him up. I think the BABIP's kind of low right now, but look for him to settle in about a 255, 260 average, and going to give you some real nice pop for a corner infielder.
And one guy who always gives his pop is Scott Engel. Catch him on the Fantasy Sports Network and, of course, on the Fantasy Sports Channel on Sirius XM as well.
Yes, Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, Sirius 210 XM 87, the Roto Experts in the morning, 6 to 11 a.m. Eastern, always simulcast on the Fantasy Sports Network.
And that wraps things up from Citi Field. He's the King, Scott Engel, and I'm Mike DeMurgis.